For the level design that we sketched out in a previous video, we need one more thing. Because as you can see from this amazing drawing, we need a bridge. Because this very obviously is a bridge, right? We can all see that. And that bridge is going to exist kind of in a broken down way, where when we step on one of its planks, it's going to give us about a second or so to jump off of it before it starts sinking down. And when it sinks down into the lake, and that would kill us. So that would force the player to speed through a bit of decently precise platforming. So let's make that blank blueprint. What we're going to do is we're going to go into our level props folder, make a blueprint class. It's just going to be a normal actor BP sinking blank. And all that this is really going to need is it's going to need a cube for the time being. We're going to change this static mesh out to something else entirely at some point, of course. And also a box collision, because we need to figure out when we actually trigger this thing. The box collision, we want to not be a child of the cube necessarily. We want to make that the default scene root, and I'm going to not make this the new root. Whenever you put a component over the default scene root, you get the attachment or the making it a new root. If you make it a new root, it's going to be the base component that everything else is attached to. But that also means that you can't give it any more relative offsets to a pivot point, because then this object is gonna become the pivot point. So we want to just attach this. The scene root itself, we cannot move. As you can see, it doesn't have any offset, it doesn't have any rotation, but this box we will be able to move. We'll fine tune this and we'll make a placeholder asset for this in a moment. But what we first want to do is in the event graph, really, it's quite simple. When we overlap, we want to check, is this equal to the get player pawn as per usual? And if it is, we want to start a countdown, a delay. So we add in a retriggerable delay, which is, I believe, a relatively new thing for Unreal. We have a normal delay as well. And the difference being is this normal delay, if I execute it again before the delay is over, it just stops the execution of that second time through. So this also works as a gate saying, hey, whatever comes after this, after it's been triggered once, wait this amount of time before it can trigger it again at all. A retriggerable delay will reset the counter when it is run again. So for this purpose, that's actually kind of nice, because if we jump off of this plank and back onto it, it will re-trigger this delay, allowing us to kind of jump in place and postpone it sinking down. That might seem a little lenient, and if you don't want that, of course, you do want to just have the normal delay. After the first time you jump onto this, you have this much time, and after that, it just sinks down. This retriggerable delay, in this case, will give you a bit more leniency to jump off and then jump back on and have it re-trigger from the start instead. This very much is a game design choice. Depending on what you want to do, you can do one thing or the other. We're going to go with the retriggerable delay in this case. The duration of that delay, I'm going to promote to a variable, and we'll say sync delay as its name. And we'll make that a variable that is instance editable. As a quick reminder of what this instance editable exposed type of thing means, when you just pull this into the world, we'll have a field here that we can give in values on a per instance basis. So we can duplicate this thing around a little bit. We can say this one has a sync delay of 1, and this one has a sync delay of 1.5, and they'll individually remember how long they specifically are supposed to wait. Just a nice little thing to be able to reuse this in different places in the game, which might need quicker or slower reaction times. We're going to set the default value to maybe 0.5, kind of seems like a good one. And then after that delay has been completed, what we want to do is we want to move this actor down, wait a little bit, and then move it back up. Now, we've actually already seen what we need to use for this in a previous video. We need to add a timeline. Don't do add timeline components, scroll down a little bit and add a timeline. That adds it as a node, which is much easier to work with. Now, this is going to hook into the play from start. We're going to do kind of the same thing that we did before, which is make a flow track. You'll see me do this quite a lot when working with timelines. I don't actually give in the values for the timeline itself. The timeline only interpolates between 0 and a value of, add another key, 1. So this is how quick it's going to sync, and then a value of 1. So over the course of a second, actually let's make this maybe 0.3, make it a little bit quicker. It's going to just interpolate linearly from 0 to 1. We'll set it to use the last keyframe as the end of the timeline as well. And then that output I'm going to put into a lerp node as the alpha. This way I can interpolate between any two arbitrary values that I can easily switch around and even make variables out of without it being stuck to this specific timeline. It's just kind of nice. Whenever we update this, I'm just going to take our cube here and set the relative location. There's a couple of different types of location setting. You can set the location in world space, and that'll set it in a location relative to just the world's coordinates 0, 0, 0, which is what this cube is located at. However, that is just set world location. Let's just set a component to a specific location within the world. Sometimes that's very useful. What we want to do here is we want to set the cube's relative location instead. And that's going to make the cube move relative to the pivot point of this actor, which is the default scene route. So that'll just make it move up and down relative to wherever this thing is in the world. By default, its location will just be 0, 0, 0, and we're going to be making it move down. So we set this new location to a make vector. Make is kind of the same as breaking, which we've done before. When you have a struct, you can break it, but you can also make one. And that takes in the individual components and outputs a struct of a specific type. In this case, the x and the y are going to remain at 0. And we just want to add in the z. And we're going to then lerp this from when a, so when our track is at 0, to b. And let's say that this is minus, I don't know, I guess minus 100 is enough. Minus 100 is probably enough. So b will be minus 100. And if we then hook this up into updates, you will be able to see if we put this into the world in a moment. After a amount of delay, it's going to be moving linearly from its current position to 100 units below. So let's just shut it off. I'm going to put this into the world. I move it up a little bit. I have to jump onto it, but it'll move down so we can actually see that. And if I jump up on it, I missed a jump. This is kind of pathetic. You will see that it moves down just like that. The delay is actually pretty short. Half a second is a lot shorter than I felt it was going to be. So let's do 1.5 seconds instead. Taking a real quick break here to say, if you're enjoying this or finding this helpful, a way that is entirely free for you to support me, if you don't want to sign up for the Patreon, is to go down below in the description to my Steam page for my own game and add it to your wishlist. Only takes a couple of seconds to do, but it actually does massively help me out and support me making my game and the content that comes along with it. And that way we'll actually see that there is a delay, 1.5 seconds, and then it moves down. Again, this is one of those things that you're going to tweak. Maybe just 1 second, which is what I was going to do initially, is actually the sweet spot. But that just moves it down, and that's fine, because this is going to move it down into a location where we put in a kill volume, so that'll be fine. But then after it is finished, we want to wait around for a little bit of time as well. And then we want to reverse it back up to where it started. So when this timeline is finished, we add just a normal delay. This doesn't need to be retriggerable. And let's say that that delay is just 0.2. It's good enough. Maybe 0.4, a little bit longer. And when that is completed, we just reverse this from the end. Now, this does come with one issue, and that is when this finishes reversing, it's going to retrigger this delay as well. So we don't actually want to do that. And that is where this direction pin comes in. So let's just make a little bit of room here. We want to check if this direction pin is equal, and don't use the normal equal operator. When you see one of these dark green pins, that is an enum value. And an enum is more or less just a number that has a name attached to it. So it's a little bit easier for us as the programmers and the designers to work with it. If you just do the normal equal operator, you need to give in the number, which is option 1 or option 2 or option 3. It's not very user-friendly from a human perspective. But Unreal has this equal enum, and this will actually just give you a drop-down menu of the different options that this type of enum has. In this case, it is a e-timeline direction enum, which has the options of either having a value of going forward or going backward. So here we add in a branch, again, holding down B and clicking, just adds in a branch. And only if we were going forward do we want to do this delay thing, and then hook up this into the bool bin for the branch. Add a couple of redirect nodes, which you can just do by double clicking on any of the splines just to make it seem a little bit more clean and a little bit more neat, right? Cleans things up a little bit. So now when it finishes, it'll check, hey, we finished. Did we finish going forward or backward? Only if we finish going forward will it delay and then reverse it. So we can see that working in action. It'll go down, it'll wait, and then it'll go back up. It probably actually needs to wait a little bit longer even. I think making it wait for like a full 2 seconds might not be like a crazy idea, honestly. So we do this, goes down, 1, 2, and then it goes back up. So that's pretty much the functionality that we wanted to have. Now you probably do want to have a little bit of a warning of it being an unstable thing. And ideally this would, instead of being a static mesh, maybe be a skeletal mesh. So we could add an animation for this thing, kind of like vibrating around. We're not going to do that right now. What we're going to do instead is we'll just add in some programmatic animation. Which is to say, we're going to take this cube and we're going to set its local offset, or set its relative location. Set relative location. Local offset is just taking its relative location and adding something onto it. This is setting it to an absolute value, just saying, okay, compared to the default scene roots, you are X there, Y there, Z there. Adding a local offset is taking where it is already and adding more onto it. But we don't want to do that. We want to set the relative location. And actually we want to do that in event tick, I just realized. So this is one of those things where event tick actually comes in useful, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to make a vector. And we're just going to keep the Z at 0, but now we're going to kind of randomize the X and the Y slowly by getting a Perlin noise 1D node. This takes in a value and outputs a kind of soft gradient random output. Which is to say, it's not entirely random. It's not going to be jumping about all over the place. What it's going to do is it's going to fairly smoothly move back and forth between a value of -1 and +1, with some amount of randomness thrown into that curve. So we just give that into the X, and we give another one into the Y, and then we just need to give these two different like offset inputs. And the easiest way to do that is just get the game time in seconds. This is just a number that is always accessible from pretty much anywhere in the engine, and it's just a timer that runs up constantly as the game is running. It just starts at 0 when the game is just booted up, and then it keeps effectively infinitely going up. So we can put that into directly for the first Perlin noise, and then you just add a fairly arbitrary value to it. You can even just add 1 to it, but let's just add like 57. 57, not a special number. It just needs to be a number that is offset from the initial value so that these two are separate values. And that'll make it go back and forth in units of 1, which isn't that much. It'll always do that now on event tick. So you can see it very slightly like moves around a little bit, but probably a little too slowly and probably a little too subtly. So what we want to do is we want to first make the movement bigger. So we multiply the vector, and a vector, you can multiply this with the individual components. You can say, I want to multiply the X with this, the Y with this, and the Z with this. Downside being, if any of these are 0, it zeroes out the entire calculation. So that's not ideal. What you can also do in these math nodes is right click them and change the second input to something else, an integer, or in our case, we're going to go with a float. Floats can either be single precision or double precision. It doesn't really matter what we do here, but these are less prone to errors at very, very large numbers. Again, in our case, it doesn't really matter. Single precision, technically a little cheaper. And this number will now indicate how big the movement is for it like vibrating around. So if we set this to 100, it's probably going to be a little extreme. But you can see now it's moving around kind of randomly in a fairly smooth pattern, which is kind of nice. 100 is way too much. Let's set this to 10 instead. And that's a little bit more like it, but now it's a bit too slow. So what we can do is, instead of this game time in seconds just being the value that we give in directly, we can multiply this just to make it tick up faster. If we multiply this by 10 as well, and then we use that to plug in both of these, it's going to be vibrating 10 times as fast, which is honestly kind of nice. I'm kind of here for it. So now really the only thing that we need to do is lock this behind a bool. So add a variable, shaking, pull that in. And the fun thing, I don't know if I've shown this before, but just like with object references, like references to actors that I've shown before, if you right click that, you can convert it into a validated get. With Boolean variables starting in Unreal 5.5 or 5.6, you can right click them and just convert them immediately into a branch. So only if this thing shaking is true will we actually be shaking it. So here we just change this to 2 separate triggerable delays. We first add in a delay for how long it takes for this thing to start shaking. You can just make that do it instantly, but it's nice to have that like take a little bit of time, 0.2 seconds in this case. And then we give it another little bit of delay before it actually starts sinking down. When it starts sinking down, it's nice to set this shaking back to false. So what we do is we begin overlap for the actor. We check this, is it the same as the player? Then we wait for a fraction of a second. Then we set shaking to being true. And then we wait for a little bit longer. And then we set shaking back to being false. And then we actually start the downward movement. Again, if you could just make this a skeletal mesh with an animation, that might be a bit easier. And it gives you a lot more control over how the shaking looks and how it feels and that kind of stuff. But now it takes a little bit, it shakes, and it goes down. The upside of doing it with a skeletal mesh as well is that you probably have a separate collider that doesn't actually shake, so your character doesn't like move around with it. It's a little ugly the way that it moves around with it now. So maybe just decrease the magnitude here to 5, just a little bit lower, so that we just have, yeah, it's a little bit better. So that way it kind of forces us to keep jumping and we're good to go like that. All right, from here it's just a matter of putting in a more accurate sized box for this mesh to actually work, and then putting the collider a little bit smaller and a little bit flatter down against the plank as well. And we've got our sinking plank. So we've got a proper like platforming element that we can now use, which means we pretty much have everything that we need to start building our second island here. Now, I'm going to make building the second island into its own dedicated video because it's going to fill out a little bit more about making the block out meshes for this plank, for instance, and just putting together the kill zones and everything that we've built over the last couple of videos. We're going to put that together into an actual section of this level. Hopefully it's going to be a little bit of a shorter video because I won't need to explain all that much, because it's not going to be, but it's still a good process to just take you through to actually constructing it. So that'll be next time. And a very big thank you to all my Patreons. You can see them on screen right now. If you want to help support the channel or get any of the project files in any of my tutorials, there's a link down below to the Patreon page to support me, or alternatively as a YouTube member. My Cave Student tier supporters, Oiku, Earl, Monserville Urno, and my Cave Digger tier supporters, Mauricio Farias and Chang the Do.